Hi everybody, Richard Tromans here again at Artificial Lawyer TV. Today we're doing another product walkthrough. This time it's about Cicero, and to tell us a bit more about it is Joe Raymonds, who is based in Australia. Take it away, Joe.
Thanks so much, Richard. So one of the first things you'll notice when you've jumped into Cicero is you're not greeted by a chat GPT-like prompt. Cicero is an enterprise application, first and foremost powered by AI. You'll notice that when you look at Cicero, the very first thing you'll see is how much work Cicero has done for you. Our view is that the biggest issue affecting law firms looking to adopt generative AI isn't necessarily getting the use cases correct or preventing hallucinations. It's what happens if the adoption of generative AI is successful. What happens if you fulfill the promise of reducing 30 to 40% of the number of billable hours that you, as a law firm, are spending on client matters, especially when the work that you're doing has become more valuable, but the amount that you traditionally might have charged clients is significantly decreased. We don't purport to have the only answer to this. That having been said, though, we feel partly responsible for introducing this particular problem into consideration. We meter the amount of work that AI does for clients on behalf of lawyers throughout the platform. We do so through a calculation as such, a human can read 300 words a minute or 18,000 words an hour. When you ingest 18,000 words into Cicero, we consider that one AI unit that's been used to perform the summarization task on load. And every time you run a chronology or perform an investigation of a matter of fact, again, we meter that particular contribution tied back to the client and to the matter. We've seen some of our clients pass along these costs as disbursements in line with our upstream charging model. Now, this is a very nuanced conversation that firms have to have with their clients about how value can be shared and passed through. We certainly don't intend to mandate it, but we do feel obliged to help in some way, shape, and form, and that's the very first thing that we do, and that you can see at every stage of the operation, every operation within the platform. I mentioned earlier that everything is cut by client and matter. I'm clicking here on Operation Keppel, which is an Australian independent commission against corruption matter. It's in the public domain, and in order to get information into the platform, you can either do so via a local import or integration into iManage. Coming soon is NetDocuments integrations and relativity integrations. iManage allows you to sync as a once-off, so you've got the ability to then see the individual folder structures, at which point you can then specify the folders themselves, or alternatively specify the individual files, at which point pressing import will pass this through into Cicero against the matter that you've already created. Another option is importing documents locally. The only reason I talk to this is because we've built the facility to split documents. We use three types of technology to split files. This is a relatable story from my time as a paralegal. One of the reasons why I ended up ultimately leaving the legal profession and pursuing a career in IT. I really didn't like splitting files, and I was forced to do it a lot. So imagine you're working for an insurance agency, an insurer, and you've been passed through a packet of 1,200 files, 1,200 documents, all which is actually 450 component documents bundled into one. We use three different types of technologies, a combination of unpicking bookmarks, using a classical machine learning model to look at both the headers and the footers, as well as using generative AI to detect semantic changes in topic across our various different PDFs to identify where the logical splits between documents should be. So I'll give this a second to load the thumbnails. You'll see this is the end of document 1 and the beginning of document 2. And if you don't actually like where it's been split, you can manually decide to split it in further locations, at which point it then uses GenAI to identify the relevant topics if the bookmarks don't have it. And once it's done, you can then upload and finish it, and it'll incorporate it into Cicero, pass it back through to iManage, or allow you to download it if you've imported it from a local drive. Now, the reason why we've done that is because we consider this an essential pre-processing step to unlock some of the other use cases that are supported within Cicero. We chose no task that required a law degree, but rather is still performed by lawyers when we looked at what generative AI could do to assist legal professionals in the pre-processing parts, in the preparatory phases of litigation. Specifically, we looked at document classification, document summarization, the production of chronologies, investigating matters of fact, and extracting information from uniform documents. Now, if you've got a great big bundle of documents that hasn't been delimited in line with the actual component documents, and extracting information such as let's consider certificates of capacity, which might look at doctor's notes informing what dates a patient was not cleared for duties of work. If you've got one giant bundle, the AI system isn't going to effectively be able to loop through those particular documents without natural boundaries. If you split them, into their component parts, then it will be very easily able to identify who was the patient, who was the doctor, what was the date of attendance, what dates were that particular patient out of work for, when were they cleared for, what sort of duties were they cleared for, if they were in fact cleared for any duties at all. And it can do so with a great deal more precision than if you were trying to do so across one giant bundle. If I go back to my matters again, I'm now going to click on the same matter and click on New Task. You'll see here that every single document that's been imported into the platform has been given a 50 to 100 word summary as a synopsis. This is not with the intention of removing the need to read documentation. Instead, it's there to provide an insight to let a legal professional know that this document might or might not be useful to their particular query. It's there as a synopsis to assist in trying to work out whether, when they're searching for information, it'll help them understand if this is going to be likely the right document or not. It also performs a classification of these particular types of documents. Now, we've set by default to use an Australian standard, the default document management protocol. That having been said, this is entirely configurable on a per matter basis, and up to the point where lawyers can even set their own classification schemas for different types of documents. We also extract the most relevant date applicable to this particular document. Now, this is not done through metadata tagging. This is done using AI. So what it means is if metadata has been stripped from a document, it'll still be able to find a most appropriate date. That could be the date an email was sent, the date a contract was signed. If not signed, then prepared. So it's got some level of contextual understanding. Now, it also has an ability to search over the top of these classifications and tags. So if I wanted to see only the emails in this particular tranche of documents, I can filter from several hundred down to only 26. Now, this is the least of what you can do inside Cicero. Once you've actually selected your documents, this is where the fun part starts. You can then specify the types of activities that you'd like to perform. We've positioned our QA capability as an investigation because this might be surprising to a surprising position as a founder of a generative AI company, but we are of the view that LLMs cannot reason, but instead can be used to extract relevant or reactive bits of information quite effectively. So it's not a review, it's not a QA. It's assisting in identifying factual questions that don't involve complex reasoning or reasoning steps. An example, if I were to ask a question, one of the biggest challenges that we've seen to adopting generative AI for lawyers is that some lawyers, while they might take to it, like to duck to water and start immediately prompting effectively and with great ease. Others might ask a question that probably they shouldn't, that might not be that useful, and they'll get a potentially bad answer. And as a result, they'll have a bad experience and throw up their hands and walk away. I'll give you an example. This is a matter of, there's some context for this sample matter that we're looking at. It's a public inquiry into a corruption hearing for investigation into corruption of a public official, a New South Wales state premier, who was accused of providing not declaring a conflict of interest in supporting the projects of her boyfriend, whom she did not disclose, who was also a member of parliament. So if I were to extract all information about Gladys Berejiklian. Now, this is 53 hours worth of reading across 126 documents. If I were to ask this particular question, it would absolutely not give me a very good answer. If I press validate, what's going to happen here? AI has read the high-level the high-level summaries that Cicero has produced, and it has instead suggested an example of what a good question might look like. Now, this might not necessarily be the question I want to ask, but it's actually not a bad question. Having read it, I haven't seen it before. I'm not sure what answers it's going to give, but I'm confident it's going to be quite powerful. I'm going to ask a second question. One of the other things that we've seen is sometimes lawyers might occasionally overfit their prompts, meaning they'll ask too many questions and get too many weak answers in response. So we gave the facility to ask up to 10 questions within an investigation. I'm going to ask another question. I'm going to look for a very specific needle in this haystack. I'm going to ask, did Daryl Maguire have a set of keys to Gladys Berejiklian's house? I'm going to ask that question. Now, we are fully transparent with how the prompts work across both investigations, chronologies, and information extraction. These are fully visible and customizable. And I'll take you through that more in just a moment. Let's give it a name and title. So just some context as to actually what's going on behind the scenes here. I fully appreciate that the document review might not appear to be the most unique feature in an AI product. One of the big differences between what we do and what we've seen done is that we don't position this to be a magic answer to a question, but rather a process that AI has followed that we believe adds a tremendous amount of value, but it adds even more value because we acknowledge the potential limitations about what can be done, and try and be as transparent as possible as to the steps that have been taken. So as to what's happened here, AI has, in just a moment, we're going to see in the answer analytics section the number of pages that were ingested to answer this question. And then AI will inform us of the number of pages that it deemed reactive to the question. Now, it's comparing across a number of different metrics, a number of different retrieval frameworks, the reactivity of the pages against the question. It's assessing cosine similarity, lexicographical similarity, as well as a matching process called best match 25. It's taking an aggregation of those data sets, deduplicating them, and working out how many pages are actually deemed relevant to the question. We then feed those through into a summarization model to then review the actual relevance of those pages to the question. It's actually loading question 1 first. And what's happening then is it then provides the page references, a snippet of the page, and a set of relevance to the question. And it will do so over potentially thousands of pages, and answer it in terms of in sets of batches. So what's happened here is, if I just look at the answer analytics, it's found 1,831 reactive pages, each of which have been a distinct LLM query. And it's found from the first 250 documents, 90 relevant pages. And it's going to loop through this 1,831 reactive pages in batches of 250 until all of those are complete, at which point it will give us various different review batches to read. Now, this sounds a bit contrived and convoluted, but I want to extend an analogy here. If you go back 20 years and imagine you're in a file room with 5 paralegals, 6 paralegals, and you've got several questions that you'd like answers to across the vast array of information, you would divide and conquer. You would say, you take this column of boxes, you take this column, and I'll take that column. And we'll come back in a week and compare notes. That's effectively what AI is doing here. You'll see in review batch 1, we only looked at 1 document. In review batch 3, we found 3 documents, and so on. So it'll continue to iterate through this process until it's able to answer the question. And it will do that for both question 1 and question 2. There's a lot of reasons under the hood as to why we've done it this particular way that we can perhaps cover in subsequent sessions if you're interested. But we found this to be extremely accurate to the point where it eclipses all of our internal benchmarks and finding relevant needles and relevant haystacks. Very conscious for time. I might just jump into a chronology capability while this is still loading. This is another matter that's in the public domain. This was a This was a famous case in Australia by a fellow called Bruce Lehrman, who was accused of assaulting a staffer in Parliament House. So what you're seeing in this chronology is it's perhaps not a unique. There's a couple of unique features to this that I'll talk to more than the actual base capability itself. We found it was somewhat easy, in fact, to build a chronology that would loop through individual pages of text. But the challenges that we found were that AI is only about 95% accurate, and the issue that lawyers faced was how do they know which of the 5% are inaccurate? They have to look at every single row with a lens of suspicion, which often required them to do more work reviewing the chronology that we gave them versus actually building out the chronology themselves. So in response to this, what we've done is we've actually spent 50 times as much compute validating, peer reviewing each of these particular rows than we do generating the chronology in the first place. If I click on the peer review here, you'll see that it's actually run an investigation across every single one of the lines, having found corroborating evidence across different pages to determine that this particular row is trustworthy and reliable. Now, when it's not reliable, as we could see in row 2, you'll see this sort of flag saying that this one is potentially misstated. Now, if I were to click on this, on the actual source document, you'll see that it says that he moves to Queensland for school in year 6. And once this decides to load, I'll just click on it from here. It's not quite a demo if it doesn't load as quickly as you hope it would.
Yeah, we are going to have to wrap up in a minute.
Sorry about that. It's long story short, it's got the ability to. There we go. So there's a level of ambiguity around the exact date because it's inferred from year 6. You've also got the ability to search chronologies. We've also got tags. Tags are very interesting because they allow you to quickly navigate what's in place and what's not. And see particular rows through particular lenses. So if you were looking to build a medical chronology, for instance, it's quite simple. Final note: there's still information overload in chronologies. You've got the ability to filter rows based off the rows that you've specifically highlighted, which can tell a slightly different, more nuanced story. That's the bulk of Cicero, and it's the only other thing I'll note here is that the reason why we can afford to do such complex operations, querying literally thousands of documents per query for investigations, and similarly spending 50 times as much compute validating outputs of rows of chronologies, is because we privately host the platform. We don't use ChatGPT. We don't use OpenAI. We don't use Microsoft in the background. We actually bought the infrastructure ourselves. And we're actually incentivized to use more generative AI calls to make the most of our investment than less. And that means that we can be creative in how it can be used and recursive in its use. That's it from my side, Richard. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to Cicero.
Yeah, no worries. No, stay with us for a second. I'll ask you a couple of questions. So just to clarify, what kind of LLMs are you using on the back end of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So we use Llama 3.1 405 billion parameters as our synthesis engine, and Llama 3.1 70 billion parameters as our summarization engine.
And how much have you added to that with your own data?
Very little. We've fine-tuned it to be uncensored. We are often dealing with firms that have extremely sensitive and quite graphic content in some of the cases they're representing in institutional abuse and in criminal matters. And we found that the content filters for LLMs were very unhelpful in actually ascertaining the facts of matters. So we took it through a process of habilitation, which is where we removed the censor model from the models to be able to answer largely any question.
Right.
Other than that, we also fine-tuned it to be able to interpret graphical information slightly better than out of the box. Although with the advances in newer models coming out, we expect that our own advancements to be slightly eclipsed over time.
Yeah, no, totally, totally. And final thing, just very quickly, can you just go over again what do you mean by an AI unit? What is an AI unit?
Absolutely. So an AI unit is a metering of the contribution that AI makes towards a matter. If AI is successful in its endeavors to reduce the amount of work that lawyers spend in a professional services industry where the most agreed, but the most common way of sharing the risk is billable hours, it changes the equation very significantly. And we believe that we have an obligation to provide something of a solution, if not the only solution. Whether that becomes an internal metric when you're calculating an alternative fee agreement to work out understand what's the contribution from a human versus AI, or if you want to pass them on as disbursements, as we've seen some clients do, charging AI in much the same way that hosting fees might be charged through from relativity. On matters, and especially larger matters.
But what actually is an AI unit? This is the token cost to you. This is what is the
it's
unit?
words processed. So it's 300 words. A human can read 300 words a minute, 18,000 words an hour. If you process 18,000 words of a document, we will equate that to one AI unit.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, so an AI unit is a measure of words processed.
Correct. Yes.
Brilliant, brilliant. That's fantastic.
Aligned to human reading speed.
Well, thank you very much, Joseph. And I'm sure we'll be hearing more about Cicero in the future. But for now, we've got to leave that there. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.